You are looking for tips, tricks, and hacks to grow your business. Social media superstar Janet Johnson and connectedness master Terry Bean merge the powers of social and business networking for explosive business growth. You'll laugh, so grab a notebook, throw on your headphones, and get ready for another enriching episode of Business Growth Time. Hey, Terry Bean here with another fun and exciting episode of Business Growth Time. We're doing something totally different today. We're bringing on two guests simultaneously, doubling down on it today. We're going to introduce them in just a minute, and we're going to talk about why and the buy with them. So a little precursor, but with me, as always, you know her, you love her, you're a huge fan, and you can't wait to see her again, Janet E. Johnson, where today the E stands for perfection.
Oh boy,
E-word,
E-perfection.
She's electronically perfect. We had a little pre-show discussion, and we were talking about a test that she came across and scored as a perfectionist.
Hey, only 1% of the population.
Shocking.
By the way, I just created one of those quizzes myself. It's all fake. It's all fake. It's all fake. The whole thing. So,
that's too funny.
But anyway, so no, that is good. So
E-perfectionist. That's it.
Sure.
All right. Well, let me introduce our guest and let's get right into it. I've known Jeff Bajorek for about a year in Detroit. He was one of the great people that actually paid for that event. Good job, Jeff Bajorek. We'll talk about that day. That's a really funny story, and you're a heck of a good sport. Jeff is involved in a podcast with his pal, Christie Walter. Both of them are certified Gittimer trainers with the man, the legend himself, Jeffrey Gittimer. You may know of him from the Little Red Book of Selling. If you don't know of him from that book or his almost dozen other books, you should know about him because the guy has some really cool ideas about interacting with the customer. But I'm going to let them fill you in on it. Jeff Bajorek, Christie Walter, say hi to Ernie.
Hi, Ernie.
Hi, Ernie. Who's Ernie?
Who's Ernie?
Janet, who's Ernie?
We have an E theme, so we named our audience Ernie.
Oh, Ernie.
Got it.
What's up, Ernie? I love it.
So, yeah, I mean, I haven't been on this podcast before and heard several of the episodes. I know that the E at the beginning means something different every time, and that's awesome. But I have missed, embarrassingly, I've missed the episodes. There's probably 100 of them by now.
We don't always talk about Ernie.
Okay,
yeah.
all right. All right, you're showing me up here.
A few ago. I don't know. But
okay, I get it. You're showing me up here.
A few ago. I don't know. But
okay, I get it. This is posturing on the podcast is what it is. Let's just make sure our guests know who they are and where they belong. All right, cool.
Excellent.
Cool.
We'd like to, you know what, honestly, we spent more time talking with you all about this show and what we might do than we do with anybody. For perfectionism, I have whatever is the exact opposite of E-perfectionism. I'm like Z-perfectionism. I would score like 0.
That's why you make such a great pair.
It could be. Like Paula Abdul said it best, right? Opposites attract. Opposites attract.
yeah.
Was it her or the cartoon wolf? I don't remember.
It was. I think they were both going at it.
Go to YouTube, kids. You'll find out what I'm talking about.
Well, no, isn't she on a TV show now, right? Everybody watches. Wasn't she on one of those things, X Factor or
American Idol, I think.
Don't act like I'm the only one that knows this.
No, but Paula Abdul was, yes.
Oh, okay, was, okay, past tense. All right, so let's talk about content that actually is relevant to what we're doing. You have a podcast called The Why and the Buy. Let's start there. Let's talk about what you talk about.
When Jeff and I first met, and we met at a Gittimer event in Charlotte a couple of years ago, we really hit it off and started having some fabulous conversations about our business. And our business is coaching and training salespeople. And we thought at one point, it was like, wow, we really have some gems in these conversations. We should record this. And then Jeff goes, well, why don't we do a podcast? I'm like, oh, yeah. And then we brainstormed some ideas, and the why and the buy was born, and the rest, as they say, is history. But we focus on sales, and as they say, is history. But we focus on sales and leadership content. Sometimes it's just the two of us, and believe it or not, actually, some of our largest downloads have been episodes that are just the two of us talking about a particular topic. And we have had probably 25 guests. They got 39 episodes in the can, and we're pretty much booked up with guests or episodes to record through the end of the year. So it's been an incredible journey, but we launched it in January and have had some good success with it. And we just wanted a way for people to get a sense of who we were if you didn't know us, and how do we expand that network.
Well, and it's funny too, and what Christie didn't mention there is that it was probably 6 months between when we decided that we should do it and when we actually started recording. And then it was another 2 months since we recorded before we actually produced those and published those first 4 episodes. It was something before we actually produced those and published those first 4 episodes. It was something that we were going to start in the fourth quarter of 2016. And finally it was like, all right, we're ready to go January 5th or whatever it was. And because, there's that, can we swear on this podcast?
Terry does all the time.
It's like being in my house, Jeff.
Well, being the perfectionism, I'm kind
of. So it's one of those holy shit moments. Like, oh, well, I guess we have a podcast now. Well, we should probably learn what it means to put together a podcast. And I may not be an perfectionist, but I'm pretty close. And so from the standpoint of, if I'm going to represent myself, I'm going to do it in a way that I'm proud of. So then it was, all right, now I need to learn how to do this. I don't want to just take this right away and say, here you go, whatever, a virtual assistant or a podcast production service or whatever. I wanted to be able to play with it. I wanted to know what it was that went into the production and the final product so that I knew it represented both Christie and myself. And, we put a lot of our own personality into it. There's a local band that we call our house band, and they're local to Southeastern Michigan. They're called Haskins. One of the guitar players is my cousin. The other guy is Skins. One of the guitar players is my cousin. The other guy is the guy that Ken and I graduated high school with. I was in a band with those guys when we were in college, and they've gone on and become way better musicians than we ever were when we were kids. And so it's kind of cool that we've got this local kind of flavor to it, and we can bring perspectives and our own personalities that are shown through it. And I think part of the journey was figuring out how to do that ourselves, so that we could do it that way, so that we didn't just sound like everybody else. Because that's the thing. And I know you guys have a team of people that help you to produce this, because this is only a small part of what you do, being that you're both a lot more established. Than Christie and I are. But we wanted to take that approach. And interestingly enough, now it's like, oh, okay, we got this figured out. Can someone do this for us?
Yeah. 2.5 years that we've been doing it. I did mine at the beginning too. And I actually had a different partner at the beginning. So
Kimmy, the social media puppet.
Stop it.
Where's Kimmy?
She lives on the internet today still, if you go to YouTube. But we had Lisa Celine, who actually had worked with Jeffrey Gittimer quite a bit, had been my partner, but then she went on to do different things. Terry called me, and don't do it anymore yourself. And so now literally we record, and we will, I just have to hand the recording off, and then I only have to give the title to my graphic designer, and he just creates this awesome graphic and all that stuff. So, I mean, we literally just have to focus on getting, the people to interview and the recording, and then push it out on social media once it's live. So.
Sure. But I mean, that's kind of, Terry, what you and I talked about, just a couple of weeks ago or last week, I think. What did we want to talk about today? And one of the things you brought up was, intentionally growing your business or taking the time to grow your business the way you want to do it. And I think taking ownership of the final product is only one of the ways that you can do that. And once you get your feet underneath you, you're like, okay, we've got our rhythm.
Yep.
I don't want to call it a formula, but we've got a certain way that things that we can instruct or teach or delegate. Then, okay, cool. Then that's something that is replicable outside of your own 24 hours every day, because, when the way we kind of break things up is I handle the post-production and the mixing, and then Christie handles the actual distribution of the podcast. And so far, well for me, but it went for, I was spending 2.5 hours per episode after we recorded to make sure that everything was good, and finally got through that learning curve, learned to let go of some of the perfectionism as it came to, ums and stutters and buts and ifs and ands.
That's important. Yeah.
But what's also gotten better is when stutters and buts and ifs and ands,
that's important. Yeah.
But what's also gotten better is when Christie and I realized that we just kind of take the approach of we're recording live. Well, all of a sudden things flow a little more differently too. And it's definitely more authentic. And I've seen a lot more podcasts too, where I'm like, wow, that's a big show. And they don't do half the, that's standards and practices. And now it's a much more manageable time for me. I enjoy it. It gives me an opportunity to listen to our guests, especially, and some of the things that are, that come out of both Christie's and my mouth in terms of the things that we say. Cause in terms of the things that we say, cause how many times are you working with a client, you say something, you're like, oh, I should probably write that down. Well, we've got it all recorded. So sometimes going back and giving it a listen, even if it's at, almost double speed, you find that themes keep coming up. And when Christie and I work with clients, we find these themes, and then if you can hear it, if you can be present enough to hear it and kind of hear yourself speak, that theme kind of gets developed into something else that you can really make an impact to your customers and your clients with. And that's been a real value to me. So even, it's just something I won't have to do. On the other hand, that is very much a thinking process for me in terms of how I'm going to relate to my clients. And I don't know that I would go back and listen to it again, right? I mean, I'm a subscriber to my own podcast, but it's like, oh yeah, I remember that one. That was good, Skip. I remember that one. That was good, Skip. Oh yeah, I remember that one. That was good, Skip. I remember that one. That was good, Skip. So,
yeah, I get smarter every time. Yeah, I get smarter every time I listen to one of the podcasts. I'm like, man, damn, I am good. Right? So it's a great confidence booster. Yeah, right.
When you listen to yourself.
Right? So it's a great confidence booster. Yeah, right.
When you listen to yourself and watch, both sides.
Absolutely.
Of it,
Well, and I think there are a couple of things that when, kind of tie this back to taking time to grow your business. I work with a lot of small business owners, a lot of solopreneurs. And one of the first conversations we have, keep the lights on, keep the kids in school, keep them fed, so that you're not freaking out at every moment about the fact that there isn't enough money coming in.
Basic necessities, right?
Yeah, exactly. Very basic stuff. And it may mean that, hey, you're going to do some things that are not part of your long-term plan. That's okay. I don't want you to freak out about that money at it. And it was a marketing element to our businesses that were still in the fledgling state at the time. And it was a way for people to get to know us. So we needed to be intimately involved with that. And I think now that we have, we've got 40 plus hours of recording under our belt, we've got 40 plus hours of recording under our belt. Now it's an opportunity where we actually understand what goes into post-production. We understand what goes into distribution, and we can associate the appropriate level of value to that. If we had started out, I think, with someone else doing it, we wouldn't know what was the right amount of money to spend on it or not. And I think the other side of that is picking up sponsors and starting to work on finding ways for other people to fund the production of the podcast is probably the next stage that we'll go to, so that we're not necessarily having to fund that out of our businesses as much as we are providing that as an opportunity for sponsors to support the ongoing podcast.
Well, and to reach our audience.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, our audience grows, and it's kind of fun. I mean, but grows. And it's kind of fun. I mean, to your point, Christie, about perspective, and Janet and Terry, I don't know how you guys have measured this, but, in terms of not only what does stuff cost and why does it cost that? I don't know. That's more money than I have right now. So I guess I'll just do it myself because this is important. And then also, I'll just do it myself because this is important. And then also, what's good in terms of downloads and reach and listeners and things? so many times, and we can talk in terms of a podcast because the four of us here regularly record them. But I mean, for anybody listening, do you have any metrics against which you can measure? They could be anything. And that is just overwhelming.
Let me answer that question by talking about, I went to Social Media Marketing World in San Diego last year, and I decided to sit on with John Lee Dumas. Sorry, you might know that name.
Yep.
Entrepreneur on Fire. Entrepreneur on Fire. And they had a panel discussion about how to become a guest on more podcasts. And one of the things they said is, you never ask how many downloads they have. B, it doesn't matter how many downloads they have. Doesn't matter how many downloads they have. And the reason for that is because that audience, as long as that's your potential audience and they have 100 raving fans, that's all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
It's like standing in front of a room. If you could stand in front of a room and be speaking in front of 100 people, now you're getting in the ears of 100 people.
Yeah.
So whether it's 20, whether it's 100, whether it's 1,000, whether it's 1,000,000, it does not matter as long as that's your core.
Very smart guy.
Yeah. Well, and he's got millions, but fans
right.
and dollars. He puts it out there, so we all know. But
millions of important things.
Yes, right.
Exactly.
That's right. Yes.
Exactly. So that's kind of my answer to that, because it kind of, we don't have a gazillion downloads, and we've been doing this a long time. But the bottom line is, we know that people are consistently listening, and it's our core audience. And that's all that really matters to us,
Mm-hmm.
It just gets, I think for Jeff and I both, we're very jazzed when someone sends us a note, or I've had people in my network just listen to that episode on servant leadership, and you hit the nail on the head. That was amazing. Thank you so much for putting this out there. We love it. Just little things like that. And it's like, okay, so we are getting through, and maybe you're not looking to hire us today, but the next time, I guarantee, think about what we bring to the table, and you're already going to feel connected to us in a way that I never could have gotten by sending you emails, by connecting with you on LinkedIn,
Right.
or even necessarily having phone conversations with you. This is different. You don't get into this kind of depth every day with people. So it's an opportunity for them to take a journey with us. And I love it. I'd be okay if I was a podcaster for the rest of my career.
Realistically, part of the reason that I'm not a fan of post editing is what Jeff used the word authenticity earlier. If I'm going to have to be somebody not like this to appease you, we're not going to get along very well. We're not going to enjoy the business relationship. So I use my personality and attitude out front and open as almost a prickly pear, right? I don't know if I want to deal with that guy.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not sure you don't want to deal with this guy, I can guarantee you definitely don't want to, because this is it, man. This is who I am. And I'm a little more reserved on our show most of the time than I am in real life. I have a Janet must squirm once per show rule. I don't want to, sometimes I want to see different colors and shades, see what I can get away with. But for the most part, it's important to, right, and allow your audience and your tribe to come to you. So I think editing messes that up.
Yeah, and isn't that actually a challenge, I think, for a lot of salespeople in general, to really embrace who you are? And I would say that if anything, this has been a real eye-opening. A real eye-opening experience for me from that perspective of, it's okay. I don't have to check every box and check the statement that I'm making and go back and rewrite it in my head. it's okay the way it comes out. And it's okay the way it comes out. And we actually just had a conversation right before this about how our prep has changed over time. And, the fact that we are, we started out very structured with production worksheets and materials. And I know exactly.
You don't even know what those things are. Like, what are you talking about?
That's okay. We've abandoned that process.
We do get a bio and a headshot, which I need from you too. But
evidently we get those eventually.
Yeah, so you're gonna move. That's the thing, though, is I don't know if any of your listeners have noticed, but we know how to talk. And so one of the things that we were most concerned with was being succinct. And I mean, listen, we can sit down and have a cup of coffee or whatever, and we can talk for a couple hours. I enjoy these kinds of interactions. They're great. But as a listener, oh man, you hear these podcasts are great. But as a listener, oh man, you hear these podcasts, I'm like, are they going to say anything, or am I just overhearing a conversation? Sometimes that's welcome. Sometimes it's like, get to the point or we will lose you. And I think we were maybe a little more concerned about that at first than maybe we needed to be. And so what we found was, again, much like doing our own post-production and everything else, we got our training wheels. And those training wheels have been taken off, and now we just know. And it's funny too, is we've done, we've starting with the work, like, okay, what are we going to talk about? Oh, we got a guest on, they've got a book. Okay, that's cool. But you find is that the best questions that you can ask come from when you're just genuinely interested in what that other person is saying. And some of it's just about being present and being connected to the moment you're in, rather than being tied to this worksheet because what if the conversation doesn't go that way? And I'm doing any business with you, or are you too focused on what you've got to do to listen to what the other person's saying? And 100%. I mean, I don't need your script. You need to know what you want to talk about, and you need to know when it's applicable to talk about that as well. And so Christie and I have found that. And, what's interesting too is doing these podcasts over video. We can, and I tend to focus on my camera when I talk more than focusing on the screen in front of me as it is. But when I know when it's her turn to talk. And I know when she's got something that she's going to want to say, and you find this flow, and I think there isn't enough credence given by enough people, salespeople or otherwise, to just kind of allowing yourself to be in the moment, allowing yourself to really be present and understand the situation that you're in, And it takes some work. It takes a concerted effort to allow yourself to do that. But once you're there, I mean, that's what the best people do.
This is why people complain about not being able to remember names. Right? Yeah. This isn't a memory issue that you can't remember someone's name. It's an attention issue. You're focused on what you're going to say to sound intelligent or reasonable or smart or likable or whatever else. You're not focused on the other person. Right? So it's the same thing. So if you're going into a sales call with your script, you're totally worried about the things that you have to get out, which is really solving their problem most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Listen to them first.
And it's a rookie mistake too, right? So, and
there's a lot of old dogs that keep making those mistakes.
This is true. But, especially I think in our circumstance, it just gave us a lot of confidence about what we were doing. I think in our circumstance, it just gave us a lot of confidence about what we were doing in an environment that was new to us. And I think that's where you see, when I call it a rookie mistake, that's where you see especially a lot of new salespeople who are depending too much on that script to move the conversation forward. And it probably took me a little bit longer than it did for Jeff, for me to get to a point where I was like, okay, nope, we're going to just kind of move with this. And there's topic and framework. I mean, there's certainly, you want to make sure that whatever you are doing actually does come back to a point that the audience can take away. And I realized that was my driver, right? Was just, okay, so what is it? Why is someone going to listen to this? Because if you're going to spend 30 to 45 minutes of your time with me, I want to make sure that you're going to get something out of it. And I think we've learned just naturally, and we work very well together. We did learn just and we work very well together. We did learn just naturally to wrap that up effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't require a script to do it.
So here's a fun little tip. If you're going to spend 30 minutes with us, if you just turn your podcast player to 1.5x speed, it actually shortens that 30.5x speed. It actually shortens that 30 minutes to 22 minutes. So you can save 8 minutes that way. The flip of that is if you take us to half speed, we sound like we are shit hammered. So it's kind of fun if you want to do that. If you just want to hear what Christie sounds like after like 9 martinis,
it's so hard.
Great.
It's like,
he talks about that all the time. He's like, yeah, I listened to it at like 2x, and I'm going,
I can't do
dude,
2.
it's like the
that's
like,
Can't do 2. Can't do 2, but 1.5 is really good, and especially when it comes to audiobooks and things, because we're taught to enunciate and we're taught to slow down so people can hear us and we can be very
but God, it's too bad these people are challenged.
Yeah, I mean, it's saving 25% of your time.
4 to 5 times more information, right, than we speak. We can get 750 to 1,000 words in from a processing perspective, but we're speaking 150 to 200 total sense. I don't listen to enough podcasts, and I certainly, to our earlier conversation, never listen to ours. Janet, do you ever listen to our podcast?
Sometimes little bits and pieces, little bits and pieces, but not a whole ton.
Perfection needs to do a little bit of quality control check every once in a while.
If she listened
every once in a while.
If she listened to this, she'd probably cancel the whole thing. She'd be like, what are you doing? Why? She'd have a new partner, a new show.
No, Terry keeps me on my toes. So it's entertaining. Come on. I think about doing a podcast. If I did one by myself, I did a Facebook. So it's just 2 different things, because you're talking straight to an audience. I was getting to the point. I was a lot more serious. The podcasting is a little more fun and laid back and, go with the flow of things. I just was on a summit too, where we recorded via Zoom, and it was very structured questions. And she, when she asked those questions, it was very structured, and it just wasn't flowing like a podcast does. And I think that's where it takes practice, and time at doing it too. But I think and time at doing it too. But I think it's, podcasts should be a little more laid back, but I think they should always have a point and get to that point. I know one friend of mine that does a podcast, no names, but they talk BS, stuff about their life for about a half hour, and I'm like, okay, when are we getting to the actual topic at hand? And theirs can be like an hour, 15 minutes. Nobody wants to, it's great to get to know the people a little bit, but then get to the point and get to the topic.
Yeah, and what's really interesting too, and Terry might remember this from a couple of years ago when I started have a conversation over Zoom or over Blab or Google Hangouts, whatever it was, and great, that's easy. It flows. We're just talking. Put me in front of a camera by myself, and it was like, okay, well, what is this supposed to look like? You get caught. You really get in your own way. I remember supposed to look like you get caught. You really get in your own way. I remember probably 3 or 4 months into it, my wife is looking at some of these videos and she's like, Jeff, I see that that's you. And I know that you wrote that. And I love you. Right? But I wouldn't date. Fantastic. That's what she said. She would not date the guy that I see on the camera. You got to do something to lighten up. And Terry, I remember talking to you about it, and you're like, yeah, there's no energy coming back from that camera. You're looking at a camera. You've got nothing to play off of. There's nothing coming back. And, so it took some time, though. It took some practice. And Christie's going on vacation here in a couple of weeks, and so myself. And she's like, you going to get a guest? I'm like, hell yeah, I'm going to get a guest. Nobody wants to just sit and listen to me.
Honey, the show's over. We're done. I did the episode myself.
Yeah.
I could watch the drop rate. It was
for lack of anybody else, I might get my kids to be the guest.
There you go.
For lack of anybody else, I might get my kids to be the guest.
There you go.
Would be better than me just by myself.
That might be awesome.
That's funny.
Got so much good information, though. I can't imagine that would be true, Jeff.
Well, thank you for saying that. But
Yes, very,
it's
very true.
all out there. But
It's all.
except when I'm coming,
very,
it's
very
all out there. But
It's all.
except what I'm coming up with on just a streaming basis. My everything that I've put out there is out there and is able to be found. But there's always something going on in this crazy brain of mine. But so if I'm allowed to do that, know that we're going to do this because I just came up with it off the top of my head. But on our podcast, every guest comes on and we ask them what their why is. And Terry's been a guest on our podcast, so I'm going to make Terry go first before Janet goes so she can think on this for herself. But what is your why?
My why primarily layers off at my core is fun or bliss. And so chasing that, things that amuse and entertain me and that can be kind of spread out to entertain and amuse others. I want us to have fun, man. I think people take this life way too seriously, and that allows us to feel really, really good about ourselves and the people that are around us. I think we'd live in a much, much better society. So mine is stripping it all the way to straight up amusement.
How about you,
Is this a
Janet?
why for the podcast, or is it a why?
To straight up amusement.
How about you,
Is this a
Janet?
why for the podcast, or is it a why for your
Well, I might have
business?
misunderstood the question.
Why do you do?
That's what I'm wondering.
Why do you do it? Why do you do what you do, Janet? I mean,
Why do I do what I do? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I will 100% admit I am money motivated. I mean, that's just me. I keep telling my kids, I'm like, life is expensive, especially when you own a boat. But anyway, but beyond that, it's just being able to be comfortable and provide what I need to for my family. So it does boil down to money, but it also just, being very comfortable with what I'm doing. I love what I do, and I have fun with it. I have flexibility with it. I can work if I want to. I don't have to work if I want to. I have a friend that just got pneumonia and got sick, and she waitresses, and she can't even now pay her, and I'd be like, well, I'd be in my bed working on my computer. And I'd be like, well, I'd be in my bed working on my computer,
Right.
So that's kind of my why of what I do is just, obviously to make the money. Obviously, I'm a teacher background, so I love helping people too. And so that's why I have an online course, and I want to help. I tend to course, and I want to help. I tend to, because of my background with this, I tend to have bigger clients, and I need that to pay, that's what pays the bills. But I always want to help the smaller ones too. So that's why I built the online course. So I have a lot of whys.
That's what I'm getting at too. And like I said, I surprised you with this because I'll have bills to pay and needs to fulfill and things like that. But you could waitress if you wanted to, right? I mean, you could do a lot of things if you wanted to, but you do what you do for a very specific purpose, and you're very, very good at it. And I don't think anybody gets really good at something as good as you guys are without having a sense of purpose behind why you guys are, without having a sense of purpose behind why that is what they chose to do. So I'm glad that I wasn't so vague with the question, that you got to, you have a passion for teaching, and you have a passion for helping other people, and you can help the bigger corporations and companies because you've got such a skill set, but at the same time, you really love helping the people on a smaller scale because of how personal you can get, and the online course helps to fulfill that. So,
yep. And that's what the podcast is for too, kind of the smaller. It could be for any, but yeah, exactly. So let me ask you guys, we have to ask you our question. And then I have two. One is, what's your favorite 80s tune? Because that's what we were supposed to ask all our guests.
Speaking of amusement and entertainment,
my favorite 80s tune. So, all right, are you being specific to the release date of the song, or to the release date of the song, or the genre known as 80s music?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't really.
Are you too young?
What are you thinking? Like a 1992 Duran Duran release? What are you even asking that question?
No, what I mean
like
is
a wolf,
I
baby.
like gum pop 80s music, and that's why I wanted to make sure that I differentiated there. Ooh, 80s.
Christy, was that yours?
It was one of them. I think it's got to be more Prince. Maybe, maybe.
Oh, you're speaking Terry's language now.
That's our town. That's my town.
Yeah.
Oh, you were sitting next to me.
Sitting next to Terry the day the purple left the building.
Right.
Okay.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah, uncomfortably close, actually.
Did you hug it out?
Well, it was weird. There was a standing ovation in a room of 300 people for a young lady who just got done speaking, and I just sat there. Everybody got up and applauded. I wasn't moving. It was in a whole different world. I feel bad for Veronica. Not that she notices or cares.
Yeah, we were so far in the balcony, she wasn't even sure that we were there.
In the lunchroom, dude. Come on. It was a
Oh, that's right. It was in the lunchroom. Yes, you're right. I remember now. Yeah. I remember where we were sitting for most of that program. All right. My favorite song that came out in the 80s. I don't have one. That's a terrible answer.
Don't have one. All right. Well, pick the first one that comes to mind, because now it's awkward.
Oh, I will tell you. All right. I will tell you. Okay. The first cassette tape I ever got was Bon Jovi's "Slippery When Wet." So you can pull any song. I was like 9 years old. You can still probably pick up right where you left off. I can almost tell you the order that every song came in. So yeah, that was good. We'll say "Wanted, Dead or Alive." That was a really good song.
There you go. Yeah, nice.
People know that. All right. Well, that's good.
Here's some trivia for you.
Yeah.
That Richie Sambora and John Bon Jovi performed that song, just the two of them, on a stage at, I think, the MTV Video Music Awards or something a long time ago, obviously. And I was told, and someone will have to verify this, that performance is what inspired the entire MTV Unplugged series.
Oh,
really? Is that possible?
That is possible.
Is that possible?
That is possible. I remember that series. In the early 90s.
They both look like they're checking out your facts.
Oh,
okay. Yeah. You got to do it.
There was a TV series from that show.
Well, no.
That language.
Do you remember MTV Unplugged?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, totally.
The genesis for that.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, totally.
The genesis for that whole "Let's Unplug" was apparently that performance at one of the award shows, the Grammys or American Music Awards or whatever it was. Yeah. I could be lying, but it's true as far as I know. Someone told me that, and it sounded good. Sounds legit.
I like the story.
Exactly. Yeah. So for mine, dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to talk about this thing called life.
Oh, man.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you kind of are wearing purple today.
I know, exactly, right?
Very thematic.
Fits the theme. All right, we have 5 minutes because we do have another interview. We do these back to back. Just FYI, we batch it. We batch
Got it. Christy, we got to get the hell out of here.
So we need to ask you 2 questions, takeaways, and I want to know a great sales tip. Give us, each one of you, give us just your best sales tip you could possibly give us. That's something taught on your show, maybe anything like that. That's something taught on your show, maybe anything like that.
Before you make a pitch, before you try to give some sort of a value message, say it out loud and ask yourself, would I buy from me?
Very good.
And then even take that, I'm sorry, Christy, but even take that a step further. Of course you would buy for, I'm sorry, Christy, but even take that a step further. Of course you would buy from you because that's the reason that you're selling the product that you're selling. But if you were in the prospect's position, would you buy from you? That's how I want to qualify that.
Excellent. I'm not going to qualify mine. So mine is be consistent and persistent.
I like that.
Isn't it?
Can you define persistent?
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Yes.
Be consistent and persistent.
What does persistent look like? Yeah. How do you go from being persistent? Where's the line between
versus that? Annoying?
Gotcha. Well, I didn't say you have to have some knowledge of your client base and being consistent and persistent in life is important as well, right? Which means you're clear on who you are, you're clear on what you bring to the table. And if you are prospecting or if you are working with a client, that consistent, persistent presence is what's important. So it may not be persistent in sending them emails all the time, but being consistently and persistently present in every interaction is what's important. So you can take that in 100 different directions. It is, it is critical. And I had a sales manager once that told me this in regards to managing strategic accounts. And so creating that idea that you are ubiquitous, right? You're always there. It's because you have some way of providing your presence on a consistent, and persistent basis.
Well, and Janet, to answer your question, I actually wrote about that last fall. The difference between persistent and annoying is the value that you bring with each interaction. You can talk to me every day with something that I'm going to find valuable. That's the important person in the value equation is your prospect. But something that I'm going to find valuable, that's the important person in the value equation is your prospect. But if you come to me every day with something that I find valuable, you're not annoying. If you call me once a month with something that doesn't interest me at all, I will block your phone number.
Yeah.
And so that's the kind of the difference. I mean, I get Seth Godin's blog in my inbox every day. It's never annoying. I don't always read it, but it's valuable often enough that I'm willing to keep it there. There are people that I will hear from randomly that I'm like, oh, I didn't block you yet? Oh, okay. And unsubscribe. So I think that's an important distinction that people miss.
Yeah.
So awesome. Oh,
Good.
Very
All
good.
right, well, let's finish up and tell them where the best place to find each of you is.
So it's the Y and the Buy, and you can find what's that? Trademarks. Yes, it's trademarked as the Y and the Buy. You can find the podcast episodes on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts. It's the iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you get your podcasts. It's the yandthebuy.com. And there's all the contact information is there as well. For me, you can reach me at ChristieWalters.com. That's ChristieWalters.
And I was just published recently, and you can find that at rethinkthewayyouSell.com, or you can find it through my website. But
Do you assume everyone knows how to spell Bajorek, like it's just like Smith? Is that?
Don't they?
I don't
So
wondering.
JEFFEAJOREK. So be like boy, AJOREK. It's Jeffrey, or it's Jeff with a J. So JeffBajorek.com, and I'm sure those are going to end up somewhere in the show notes or something, right?
You got it.
You can, and if you can't find me, just Google. Jeff Bajorek, and I show up everywhere. I'm on Twitter. I'm on LinkedIn. Reach out, connect with me. I love the interactions. If you got a question, I answer it. I'm not someone that says, well, it's going to cost you. No, it's just, I love talking about what I do. So I've gone to greater lengths than most would call spill out. So reach out. Let's talk.
Awesome. And be sure to join our Facebook group at businessgrowthtime.xyz, or just look it up on Facebook. And that's where you can find us. You can also find our past episodes at businessgrowthtime.com/podcast.
Loved it. It's good to see you guys.
Thank you. Enjoy.